to? Well, because we're going to talk a little bit more about nutrition specifically as well, but um, you're going to learn sometimes when you back off is when you start to see more results, because we're always like we've been taught for so long that we just need to do more and do more and do more. Well, what happens is we create so much stress in our body, and that's inflammation, and that's even just residual like cortisol and fat, because we're over stressing our bodies. So we're going to talk a little bit about nutrition timing and stuff today as well. Um, but yeah, I think starting to see sort of those trends too of, okay, well, what is that sustainability? What can I actually do that's going to be lifestyle changing, and not just, okay, well, I do this really hard challenge and then, oh, well, now I have to have another challenge because this one's over and I'm not going to do it on my own, right? So we're trying to create that sustainability where it's like, okay, well, what are we going to do on our own? Like what does Michelle like to do that she is okay doing and seeing herself do for the forever potentially? Not that it's final and it can't change, because it can, but being in the mindset of thinking like, okay, well, is this something that I could see myself doing forever? Is this a change that I'm enjoying, that difference? And there's going to be varying times when maybe you have more motivation, you're more energized, and so you put a little bit more effort into it. But that comes with, okay, something else has got to give somewhere, and so we want to start being able to make these decisions consciously, and not just thinking, very narrow-minded, like just this way right now, because then that way runs out and you're exhausted, and then you don't have the backup plan of, well, what's the balance, what have I been giving up? And so then you give it up completely, and then you just like derail yourself and do something totally different, and that's also not necessarily in line with your goals, right? So that's why we do goals first, is because all of our actions need to start lining up with our goal. Well, who do we want to be in the future, right? What does that look like? And sometimes we don't know exactly, but we have a little bit of an idea. And it's the journey of it that we start to actually put those pieces together and figure out, oh, well, this is what it means for me, and look, I've been doing this a long time, but my journey is different than all of your journeys, and all of your journeys are different. We can learn from each other, and we can take, all the experience and all the people that I've worked with and all those scenarios, and we can make a pretty good educated guess as to what's going to be a good method for you to do that. But it comes down to you individually deciding, like, yeah, you know what, that one works for me, that one doesn't, or let's tweak this, and really kind of feeling that out. And that takes time. And so that's why we have to be so patient with ourselves and realizing, okay, well, the recipe is changing as well, you know, and that's okay.
Patience.
But yeah, patience, that's the hard one.
Patience is patience is probably something I need to work on.
Yeah. We all need to work on it, because we live in that world where everything's so accessible right now. We don't even have to wait for dial-up internet anymore. It's just on our phones automatically. Right? And so like all of these things are easier and easier and easier. Well, there's still certain things that they don't happen faster. And sometimes the harder we try to make it happen faster, the more we derail the progress, because if we just take a step back and we be patient, then our bodies will actually change more, because the stress is not quite there. And so our bodies don't actually recognize the difference between mental stress and physical stress. It's our central nervous system that processes all of that. So a good example of this is, you had a really stressful day at work, and so you go to the gym to blow off some steam, and that's great. You might mentally feel better, but the stress from work was stress on your body. The workout is actually stress on your body. And if you're not fueling and recovering properly, then you're just creating a lot more stress in your body, right? And so, talking about nutrition timing, I think I'll probably do more of a video tomorrow on that. I think that'll be a good one for tomorrow. But just to kind of think about it as um, just like dealing with the actual stress on your nervous system. Um, so if the workout is stress, we want to eat like right after. So basically what's happening is we're creating more cortisol buildup in our body because, well, that's our stress hormone, right? It's also, look, cortisol is also really good. We want to have this nice natural cortisol curve because that's what wakes us up in the morning, right? That's what gives us energy for our workouts and energy to do things. So it's good that we have it. But what happens is when we're creating so much stress and we're not taking that stress away or shutting that stress response down, then it's just building and building and building. And we know if we have too much cortisol building up in our body, it then stores more fat, right? So we want to be able to kind of mitigate that response. And eating is, especially carbs, is going to be one of the best ways of doing that, right? And we talked about tapping too. Tapping is also going to be a good way to shut down your cortisol when we're feeling really stressed, right? So those are really important ways of being able to do that. Now we can take ourselves out of that fight or flight response into a rest and digest. Because when we're working out so hard and we're stressed out at work, well, our body is advantageous for survival to process our food. So our metabolism slows down and we're in that fight or flight. But because our body doesn't know that we're actually safe, right? It's things like, oh, well, we might be running from a bear when really like you just had an argument with your boss or your spouse or, so that stress is really, really up and we need to be able to mitigate that. So that's why we use tapping to help. And then carbs, especially like post workout, will help to it'll boost your insulin, which will, is like the opposite of cortisol. So then it will slow your cortisol down. Also why we talk about like not having caffeine late in the day, because that then spikes your cortisol. So when we take caffeine, it spikes our cortisol, and that's what actually, makes us more alert. Is like the cortisol that's getting boosted. And so later in the day, if we're having that and it's not coming down, then that's going to affect our sleep. So then if we're not sleeping, then we're not recovering, and then that becomes more of a stress. Right. So basically all we do is to try and mitigate the stress and how it shows up in our life. Right. And we can use food as a good way of doing that. So there's also, like, I know Huberman talks about like fasting and things like that, where fasting is there's not a ton of science really that shows it's so much better, and also it's worse for women because it creates more of a stress response, and women have a harder time, your bodies have a harder time dealing with the actual stress from it. And so it's more beneficial generally for guys to do fasting. Girls can do it, but you don't want to do it like longer than, I want to say 12 or 14 hours, because then you can really start to actually mess with your hormones instead of like helping them. So one thing,
Derek,
yeah.
sorry, I have a question. So fasting, I've done intermittent fasting in the
Uh-huh.
past, and it seemed to work well for me. Like long
What was
fastings
your,
don't.
yeah, what was your eating window and your fasting window?
Well, I didn't go crazy, so I wouldn't eat in the morning. Well, this is what I did. I did have my coffee in the morning, but then I wouldn't eat anything until noon, just drink water. And then
Uh-huh.
from noon to 6, I would have my lunch and whatever snackies and dinner.
Uh-huh.
And then I would fast the rest until the morning.
Okay. So I think that's
Or
probably,
was it may have been 8 o'clock at night. I'm not sure. I can't remember. It was a while ago. So
yeah. Yeah. I feel like that's a fairly common one. Um, so we also have to think about, like, we naturally fast when we sleep, right? So everybody
sure.
naturally does intermittent fast because you should be sleeping. Um, and so, just pushing through those parameters a little bit more. That's why most people, you would time your fast to be most beneficial around your sleep schedule. So that way you're not just up in the middle of the day and then having to eat at night, right?
Yeah.
So one thing that I've started kind of implementing that they found through studies was so that they, depending on how you drink your coffee, if you're drinking just black coffee, it isn't going to pull you out of your fast. But if you add, let's say cream and sugar, then that would pull you out. And there's so much, it's so nuanced. It's like everything kind of depends on like, well, how long has your fast been? Like, so one of them was if so you're not actually fasting, like even if you stop, let's say you stop eating at 6 p.m., you may not actually be in a fasted state till like 8 p.m., right? Because you still like are processing from that meal that you ate at 6. And then let's say you had even like artificial sweetener that has 0 calories, right? If you're close to the last part of you eating, so let's say you stopped at 6 and then you maybe have that at 7, that could actually pull you out of the starting of your fast. But if you're on the tail end of it, so like if you're in the morning or let's say like 10, and if you're eating at noon, then it may not actually pull you out if you just have a little bit at that time because you're so much further into the deficit or like into the fast. But I would, yeah, I don't focus a lot on it. I did it for a little while and I found it worked at first when I was actually following some of the protocols of like, oh, okay, like I'm just eating. I think mine was I would stop eating at 6 and then I would eat it, or I think it was 8 and noon or something. It was very similar.
Mhm.
But then all of a sudden it was like, okay, well, I'm not hungry. I'll just wait until 1 or I'll wait until 2. And then sometimes I was going like almost a whole day without eating and my metabolism really slowed down. I actually started gaining fat in weird areas like on my arms when I never had fat there. So it was just like I was actually messing up my hormones even more and I was down regulating my metabolism. So like I said, at first it was good, but then I had the mental part too of like, oh, well, like I'll, more is more, right? So I'll just do more. And actually it was like way more detrimental and not healthy. So if we're thinking about like the way it can be beneficial in the form of weight loss because you're just shortening the amount of food that you generally are putting in your mouth. It's not that it's actually so much better for weight loss. It's not. It's just one method of controlling what you eat. So you're, shortening that window, you're more likely to eat less calories. Now, if you're
So
already,
in
yep,
in essence, it's not a bad thing if you take it in moderation.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
you stop eating. That's
right.
never going to be my case because I actually overeat and I love it. So
Yeah,
I'll
so
never
yeah,
say, "Well,
so
I'm not hungry yet."
if you have a tendency to over, because the other thing that I would do is it almost caused me to have this binge and gore or like like gorge
Oh
myself
yeah,
and
yeah,
stuff after because I'm like, oh, I haven't eaten anything, so then I might as well just have a hamburger and fries and ice cream. And so I was eating all this junk food, right? And so
yeah.
it just was not healthy for my body either in that sense. It's like, oh well, I only have 2 hours, I have to get in 2,500 calories, what am I going to do? Right? So I found what works better for my lifestyle and my body is, waking up and maybe having, like Huberman says, waiting like an hour and a half before you eat anything. Like you can have coffee as long as it's black, but then like allowing your body to kind of wake up. So I like wait kind of like an hour to an hour and a half before I eat my first meal, but then I really try and eat more scheduled too, because it's also trying to manage your blood sugar. So you want to allow like because you get a spike, you want that blood sugar to come back down. So that's why we want to almost avoid snacking, like constant snacking, because every time we snack, we're like boosting our insulin and like boost, right? So then our blood sugar is getting elevated. And we don't want it to stay at an elevated state. We want it to start to regulate. And that's why actually today we're going to talk more about macros and really balancing out our meals as well. Because having like a balanced meal is going to manage your blood sugars a lot better. um so and it's kind of healthier on your body to have more of the balance. It's better for your digestive tract and things as well. So like basically talking about like macronutrients, so that's protein, carbs, and fats, right? So you want to try and have a balanced protein, carb, and fat meal. um, and then see, like, even if you're having a snack, trying to balance out at least two of those, if not all three. So I would say generally proteins and carbs, or proteins and fats, are usually a good bet. A lot of carbs and fats together, depending on what it is, but usually get some protein, because protein is going to synthesize a little bit differently too. When we think about it from repair, like protein is going to be really good for repairing, building muscle, things like that. But our body's only going to like digest a certain amount of that for actual like muscle synthesis. And so being able to space out your proteins kind of like a little bit all day long is better, because like it's also, it's harder for your body to break down. So one of the reasons why it's so good is because it's hard to break down. It raises the thermogenic ability of your body. So your body's core temperature actually raises to digest protein. And so that's when we think about metabolic rate. You're going to be burning more calories through through your metabolism by eating protein, because it raises your metabolic rate, like raises your body temp. But too much of it isn't going to get processed as like muscle, and the rest it it doesn't just get like directly converted to fat, right? Like it's a slower, so it's going to be more like glycogen but longer term, where carbs are going to be really good. So carbs are going to be fruits, vegetables. Those are really generally fast burning, so your body uses them really really quickly and gets rid of them. Like the energy store is like released fast. And then some more sustainable ones would be like quinoa, which also has a decent amount of protein. It's not a protein source, but like rice and what are they, oatmeal, things of that, right? Like more whole grains. Those are going to be better for more sustainable long-term energy. Okay. Now adding fats, so fats are really good for your hormone profile, right? So being able to have enough fats in your body, your hormones are going to be just regulating better, especially like obviously fats are going to be more beneficial than just bad fats. Really trying to get those in is going to be super important for just body regulation and hormones. Another thing, so carbs are going to raise your blood sugars more than anything else, because that's what they break down to, right, is sugar. So that's what's going to be really good for like workouts and things, like more energy. So I think we'll do like a specific timing. Wednesday will be more like timing, and why that's good and all that stuff. Do you guys have any questions on those yet? Yes, no?
On timing or on macros?
Well, either one. I guess macros is more today, so we should probably stay focused on that.
Yeah.
Another good part about, so adding in some fats when we're having carbs will actually slow down the absorption of the sugars into your bloodstream. So it's going to be a little bit more sustainable. So let's say if you're having like a banana with some peanut butter.
My God, that's just what I was thinking.
Yeah, right. So it's going to be it's not going to spike your blood sugar as much. It's going to be a little bit more longer lasting, sustainable, which is good, because it's going to give you a longer energy instead of like a fast burn, and it's also not going to raise your blood sugar so much. So we want to try and think about like getting those things down. Now, where it could be okay to raise it a little bit, as long as you're going to use that energy, would be like, okay, I'm gonna lift weights after this, right? So in that case, like pre-workout, generally proteins and carbs is going to be best, because the fats is going to slow it down so much that it's actually going to slow your digestion down and could hinder your workout, depending on what you're doing. I like if you're doing slower bodybuilding, I've never really had as much of an issue, but it could cause more lactic acid buildup. So especially if you're doing like hardcore, like CrossFit or cross training or some type of hit exercise where you're pushing, you're going to get more of that lactic threshold, and it's like burning, 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 burning. Not having fats prior to that workout will help your body to get rid of more of that lactic acid instead of it building up so much. Okay, so that's important.
Hmm.
What?
Nothing. I was just thinking about that. So don't have the banana and peanut butter before like a high intensity workout.
No, I wouldn't. You'd almost be better off to have like a banana and protein shake. Or actually, so
I mean,
go ahead.
no, I typically, I mean, I don't have a banana and peanut butter before I work out, but that's interesting that you would say that.
So what I use and have found to be really beneficial is like a fast digesting carb, like a powdered carb. The one that I use is called Carbolin. I just get it from Amazon. It's Carbolin with a K. Basically, it's just like it's a powdered carb. So it's like pure sugar almost, but it's, you know, a really broke down carb. And I mix that with a scoop of protein. So then it's not spiking as much because the protein is going to help balance that out a little bit. But then there's no fat to hinder my workout. And I noticed like I have a lot more energy. I'm able to push through a lot more of my sets. My ATP, which is like, that's also fight or flight, but that's what helps you, you know, push for more reps. So I feel like that fires and recovers a lot faster. So the way I do it is I would take a scoop of carb and a scoop of protein in just a regular shaker, and I shake it up. And I would say like an hour before my workout, I would drink half of it, and then I'd fill the other half up with water, so it's like kind of diluted, and then I would sip on that throughout my workout.
So you right now, I use First Form supplements,
Uh,
and I use the protein and ignition, which it sounds like the ignition is the same thing as the carb that you're talking about.
it might be
But I use it as a post workout.
okay.
Do you think that it would be more beneficial to do it as a pre-workout as opposed to post?
What do you do for a pre-workout now?
Nothing. I don't take a
Yeah.
pre-workout.
So I would say play around with it and see. So it's also going to be something like that is also going to be good for shutting down the stress response. Right? So that's also like I use it as pre and intra. So then I'm continuing to get a little bit of fuel throughout, but it's like kind of watered down so it's not heavy in my stomach.
Mhm.
And then afterwards I would just do like I prefer real food. So I just try and have real food right after. If you can't, then you know, sometimes you can just throw like an extra scoop of protein. And if you feel like you need a little bit more carb, if you've depleted a lot of it, then, you know, I would say go ahead and do that. Like the faster you can do it and shut off the stress response, the better. You want to shut that down so your body can start the rest and digest instead of staying in that fight or flight. Does that make sense?
So yeah, so right now I do not do a pre-workout. I know that a lot of people talk about it. I just don't do it. But I do after the workout, I do a scoop of protein, creatine, and a half a scoop of ignition.
Cool. And it might be like ignition might also have more like amino acids too.
Hmm.
Which are good for recovery. They're also good like intra workout. You can a lot of the stuff is you can take it any point, like pre, during, post, and it's all going to be fairly beneficial for helping for pushing and helping for recovery. And I notice a big difference in my energy when I use the, you know, the carbs and the protein prior versus not. And sometimes I'll have coffee. So like what I usually have doesn't have any caffeine. Sometimes I'll use coffee, especially if it's in the morning or whatever. I don't take any hardcore like pre-workout supplements that are like a shit ton of caffeine and arginine and a bunch of other stuff. I used to a lot. I just don't anymore. I find like I almost overdid it, you know, when I was doing a lot of fitness modeling, and now like they just make me panic. It's like, you know, it's just like too much. I'm like, no. And towards the tail end of my like modeling stuff too, I found I just ran better off just like you know, carbs, protein, and some coffee. So I felt like I had better energy. I wasn't retaining as much water because all the supplements are going to also retain a lot of water. So unless you're drinking a ton of water to flush that, they're going to be holding on to water too. And sometimes that can look like fat, and we feel like, oh my gosh, I'm overweight, or it can even be like bloat, you know, like on the scale, when really it's not. You just dehydrated, your body's hoarding it. Okay. So what I want you guys to start to get a hold of, do you guys track your macros? Anybody? I don't know.
Yeah.
My mom
Yep.
does or has. So I want to just
I
start.
do a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I mean, you guys are already kind of ahead of the game on that part. You already understand kind of what that means. So basically, like, kind of today's task is really to, one, be on this call, and you know, two, I want you guys to start, like, I use MyFitnessPal. I find it to be like just really simple. I don't get the paid version. I don't deal with all that stuff. But I want you guys to start even just logging a few of your meals that you eat, and starting to get an understanding of what are those macro breakdowns, you know? And then, I mean, depending on how deep you guys want to get into it, but we could even talk about, you know, how as a coach, we kind of figure out, you know, everything's kind of a guess, right? Like, so there's all these formulas that we enter in, like everybody's stats, and then we start to figure out, like, okay, based off of your activity, your age, your height and weight, like all of these things, you know, we determine what we call TDEE, which is total daily energy expenditure, right? So that's how much that you're actually burning throughout the day. And then we calculate your BMR, which is your base metabolic rate. So that would be, if you were to just wake up and not get out of bed, that would be about how many calories you burn. So then we
Can I know what that number is? I just, you know, just for future reference.
yeah, but you got to pay for it. Or you just go online and you type in your stuff.
It would be interesting to know what I could burn just doing nothing.
Yeah. So, okay. So this will give you kind of an idea.
You can't do nothing.
This will give you an idea if you're under eating too, because we think that we're not, right? So, for example, this is a loose, but it's not perfect science, but it's general. So generally, you'll burn about 10 calories per pound of body weight.
Just doing nothing.
Just waking up, doing nothing. Okay. Now, if you have more muscle than fat, you're actually going to be burning more, right? So that's where you start getting, but on like a general average, about 10 calories per pound, right? So, you know, if I weigh 190 pounds, just by doing absolutely nothing, I'm burning almost 200 or 2,000 calories a day, right? That's
Say
just
that again?
up and not moving. What's that?
So you're burning 2,000 if you're 190 pounds.
Yeah,
and
or
it's
like
10
if you're 200 pounds, you're going to be burning about 2,000 pounds a day, or 2,000 calories a day,
doing nothing.
just doing nothing. So then you know,
Wow.
depending on what you're doing for the day, but like let that kind of create a little bit of an awareness, because then, you know, you talk to, it's like, oh, well, I'm eating, you know, oh, if I'm eating 1,000 calories, I'm overeating. And you're like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, you're not a child, you know, like, but that's the mentality that we've gotten into for so long, you know? And so that lets you know too, like, I will see sometimes, and I don't track all the time. Like it kind of burns me out. So I'll try and go like, I'll go like a week or two and I'll really kind of calibrate my stuff. And then I'll go a little bit. And then I'm like, you know what? I just want to recalibrate. And, you know, but I've also been doing this a really, really long time. And when I need to get a little bit, when I'm like, all right, I'm slacking, like I need to, you know, hone in, and when I'm really like on it, I track a lot more diligently, and I'm really careful about like the quality that I put in my body, because that's going to be the biggest thing, is like quality of food is going to be so important. And realizing too, like that's one good thing that I love about tracking. Like when we work with people, nutrition coaching, we talk about like macros and we give people a macro prescription, which is, try and hit this amount of carbs, try and hit this amount of fat, try and hit this amount of protein. And in doing that, you start to see what kind of food choices you're making, right? There's a guy that came out with the whole, well, if it fits your macros, like then you can eat whatever you want. It's like, okay, sure, like go for it. Like if weight loss is your only goal, then sure, but it's gonna fuck up your performance, and just gonna fuck up your health. Like you could eat, you could eat all the Oreos, but you're not gonna be healthy. Like you might lose weight, but you're not going to be healthy, and you're not going to be building as much muscle as you could if you're feeding it like good ingredients, right? So always trying to focus on quality of food is going to be really, really good. That's kind of like, it's always a good place to kind of start too, especially for you guys that like, okay, what does it mean to not necessarily be all in, but to be making and taking good steps towards, who I want to be and towards my best future self, right? And sometimes it's like, okay, well, like let's just add in like a salad every day, or let's add in, like we do like the 800 gram challenge. I think it was like get in 800 grams of fruits and vegetables every day, right, Mom? Isn't that what you guys are doing? I think she froze, but so thinking about, well,
Yes.
yeah. So that's a lot of volume of food. So it also lets you see like, oh wow, I can actually eat a lot of food and be filled up, and it's not a shit ton of calories, and it's not like really throwing me off on anywhere else, right? And by doing that, you're most likely not, you're going to be not as hungry, so you're going to be cutting out some other food at some point, right? So sometimes it's about like, well, just trying to eat healthier things, and that's a really good first step, right? Because that's automatically going to start cleaning up some of the other stuff that you're doing, right? Or maybe it's like, if you have trouble hitting enough protein, well, maybe your goal for the week is every meal I'm going to add in just a little bit of protein every meal. I'm going to figure out how to create that, you guys can always reach out if you have questions or help, or so I want you guys to really start to think about, okay, if I'm piecing my meals together, what does a balanced meal kind of look like, right? Generally, we have more carbs than anything else, and then usually proteins kind of somewhere in the middle there, and then fats are usually a little lower. So thinking about that, where it's like, okay, like maybe I'll have 30 grams of protein, like 45 carbs, and like 10 or 15 fats, right? Just as a general start to see, and then piece those, like what would a meal like that look like, and start to see how I can get more balanced meals throughout the day. So that's kind of what I want you guys to focus on this week is, okay, if I can incorporate more fruits and vegetables, then I'm probably going to be, losing some worse foods down the line. Okay. Yeah. Right, Ma? Yeah. Especially if you're tracking that. And that can also be like potatoes, right? Like potatoes, sweet potatoes. So anything that's like whole from the earth, right? Like fruits and veggies are all going to count towards that. And just kind of see how your body feels too, because a lot of times we're not getting enough fiber to process all the foods that we're eating, and so that fiber is going to help us stay more regular as well, and help our system stay cleaner, so then we're processing and absorbing the nutrients that we're taking in. Because if we're eating a bunch of junk, then it's just kind of sitting in our gut, and we're not actually absorbing it for nutrient as well. It's just kind of rotting there. Gross, right? So I also want to talk about alcohol, because that's important. And it's actually quite terrible for us in the overall scheme of things too. Like I know one, it's going to mess up our sleep. It's like nobody wants to cut alcohol, which that's probably something we should tap on and look at. But everybody's, well, how can I still have alcohol? How can I do stuff? And you would be more beneficial if you just spent one day getting absolutely shit faced than having one glass of wine every night. But yet, right, which is
Interesting.
we think moderation is
Don't
better
tell us
than having
that.
one every night, right? But what's going to happen is actually, so if we're drinking or consuming alcohol while we're eating, which normally we do, or normally like throughout the meal or anything, right? Well, what happens is our body views alcohol as a toxin, right? But it's now recognizing, okay, there's this poison in my body and I have to get rid of it, right? So it's like, if we think of our intestine tract as like this big conveyor belt, right? And it's like, okay, well, I had this hamburger and I had fries, and then it's all like getting processed, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I had alcohol. Well, it's like the big doors shut on processing that, and your body spends all of its energy to detox because it's poison basically, right? So that means all of the food that you just consumed is not getting processed, it's not getting actually utilized, it's just going to sit there, so that your body can detox the alcohol. Okay, so you'd be better off to not from how alcohol affects you standpoint, but you'd be better off drinking on like an empty stomach, right? Or trying to time it, like time it enough to where you're already processing quite a bit of your food. Because what happens is then your body is not able to metabolize all the food, and you get like a lot more estrogen buildup and things because your body's not removing the estrogen that it normally would because the alcohol's messing that up. That's where you get like beer belly and things like that, because you have all that food that's not actually digested and processed. So that's why you'd be better off to just get it all done in one day versus all the time. It's also like alcohol stops us from getting into REM sleep. And so if we're drinking alcohol, even if it's just one glass every night, well, now all of a sudden our sleep is getting fucked up every single night. And REM sleep is really, really important for our bodies to heal and to recover and to actually for our brain health. So if you guys are having a lot of anxiety, depression, I would suggest cutting out alcohol completely, because that's going to really, really affect your mental health. And then I know that was also like a big goal for people too. So one thing we do with one thing Jen and I do, we run a group together. She does like the macros and the workout stuff, and then I do all the mindset. And one thing that we do with everyone is we do an elimination diet. And so the way that works is it's like 21 to 28 days. We do 28, and we just do it with everybody because why not? If we're going to facilitate it, like we're going to do it too. And now that we've done it enough, I can recognize how my body responds to different foods. And it's just about like creating awareness, right? And so what we do is it's like you cut out everything that's inflammatory. So I call it elimination, but it's just we go to eating an anti-inflammatory diet. So it's like no sugar, no dairy, no gluten, no like there's only a certain, it lessens a lot of what you can have, and you have to fully detox for at least 21 days for your body to actually get rid of all of the shit. And then you slowly start increasing like one thing at a time. So it's like, okay, I'm going to eat just gluten, and you introduce it for 3 days, like, a little bit, like 3 meals over 3 days, and start to see, because some of them will actually build up over time. So like you might not notice that after one meal, but then you have a little bit, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, interesting, how am I feeling? And then maybe the next day you eat it again and you're like, okay, I can really start to see. So I notice for me, sugar makes me really, really anxious. It makes me have like weird, like intrusive thoughts. And then gluten actually can make me have some anxiety too, but it actually hurts my joints. So those were things that like you would never make that correlation before, but then having, introduced them and seeing, oh yeah, well I can every time, like without fail, if I have this, I then experience this, a short while later. Gluten also like makes me really stuffy, like my allergies worse. So for me, it none of those things showed up as like gut issues. Like my body deals with it. Like I don't have an allergy in that sense, but I notice, okay, well, other things are actually affected. And so then I get to make the conscious decision of like, all right, well, knowing how this is going to affect me, am I okay eating this still, or do I not want to deal with that right now? And so a lot of it, guys, is just about creating awareness and then making conscious decisions about like, and it's not shameful, right? Because I'm making educated guesses beforehand. Does that make sense? So that's where we can start using food, um as enjoyment, like, and that's why we never tell people like, oh, you can't have this, you can't have that, or you can't, right? Restrictive diets aren't good for long term. You look at even like keto, it's like, all right, well, we're just going to cut out carbs completely. And I have a whole different opinion on how awful that is, like, but basically it's like so many of these diets, they're just basically designed like, if we cut out a whole food group, well, then you're eating less because the whole food group you're not ingesting, right? Now that's not good for balance, but people are like, oh, well, I lost weight on it, right? Okay, sure. Well, you just cut out a whole food group, right? But often what happens, especially with keto, is your body then has like a big rebound effect, and then you generally gain back that weight and then some too. So there's application for a lot of these different diets. Like if you're having epilepsy and seizures and things, keto is actually really good for that. That's like where it was first designed, and then somebody was like, "Oh, I lost a lot of weight," and so, oh, well, let's fucking make money and just tell everybody they need to eat this way. But you're missing out on a lot of good nutrition by cutting out a whole food group. All right. So, and everything's kind of like, see how your body responds and how your body deals with stuff and what's sustainable for your lifestyle. Cause that's also a thing that I don't love about keto is like, great, well, you can never go out and have a dinner with your friends, you know, because the likelihood that something is cooked with something you can't have is super high, you know? So try and find, so that's why we really work with like a balanced diet, right? And never saying like, okay, well, you can't have this, you can't have that. But also it's understanding, like when you have a macro prescription and you start to learn like, all right, well, I can have, 6 Oreos, which is like this much, and it doesn't fill me up, or I can have like a whole chicken breast and, 6 ounces of rice, and it's this huge thing, and like I'm stuffed after, and it all equals like, let's say, the same calories, the same macros, right? So you start to see how quality of food, you're like, oh man, I get to eat so much, and so then you're not having to sit in this miserable spot too. And I bet my mom could tell you, but like we deal with that with so many clients, is like everybody wants to be in a deficit because everybody wants to lose weight, and it's like, you don't really want to be in a deficit. It's miserable, but your metabolism has downregulated so much because you've been in a deficit for 20 years that you have no hunger response, and people are like, oh, well, like, I'm just never hungry. And like, well, that's not good. Like your metabolism's fucked. That's what's happening. Like you need to be getting hungry. That's very important. Right. And so we need to, like, food is a way for you to start increasing that, satiation, that hunger hormone. So that way you start to regulate.
My
It's
issue
just like
is I'm
alcohol.
always
Once you get a little bit,
hungry.
you want more.
You're always hungry, Anna?
I am absolutely always hungry, famished, eating all the time.
Well, so then, if you focus on quality of food too,
Yeah,
then
that's the
maybe,
problem.
yeah, then maybe you'll be one, like sometimes people have a hard time eating enough when you start to think about really healthy food, and you're like, God, I don't know that I can eat 20 cups of brown rice and 25 chicken breasts, you're like, and 3 pounds of broccoli. Like that is a lot of food, right? So starting to set yourself up, I think Anna would be a good one for you, is set yourself up with some healthier options for you to reach for, because I know for me, like generally we will crave a lot of carbs or like a lot of sugars like late at night if we haven't had enough carbs throughout the day. So if I'm eating healthy carbs, like quinoa and rice or potatoes, like if I'm eating more healthy carbs during the day, I don't have that need at night. I don't have that really big craving for junk food because I'm already feeding my body stuff. Now, for me, especially long term, I can eat the same thing every day. It doesn't bother me, but I like it to taste a little different. So like I'll season it different. I might throw a different, like hot sauces are good because they're usually pretty low calorie and usually not a lot of junk in them. I've also found like I love barbecue sauce, so I found some that are like better, healthier options, or sometimes you can home make your own stuff. So just find things that allow you to change it up, but still focus on quality. And we kind of try and err on like the 80%, 20%, to where it's like, all right, like 80%, or even 90-10 if you can. But it's like 80 or like 80 to 90% is like really healthy, high quality stuff. And then like 10-20%, like whatever the fuck you want, right? As long as it's not crazy out, like still within the parameters of like a macro prescription. But I think for you guys too, just starting off, like depending on where you're at in your journey, like just add in, like think about 800 grams of fruits and vegetables and fit that into your
800
day.
grams.
See how that starts to change and implement, right? See what kind of choices you're making. See how maybe your cravings are different, right? Mom, do you have any insight from doing that? Like that because you've been through that and you've done that. See if she's still on. He's paying attention. Taking her points away for the day.
I just went into my fitness pal to see where I was at.
Yeah, where are you at?
I'm low on my carbs today.
Yeah. Do you
I
notice
nailed my protein. I'm always low on my fat.
you're low on fat?
Oh my goodness. I'm always 100%
too.
over my fat.
Yeah, I
I
find if I get
almost
my protein, I
have
usually get my
to
fat.
shovel in nuts. I always have
I
to
almost
shovel
never
in
meet
nuts
my
at the end of the day.
Do you? Yeah. So think about, like maybe starting earlier too, because if you're having to catch up at the end of the day, that can also affect your sleep.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Bless you.
Bless you.
Thank you. You're there.
There's mom.
Yes, it's sorry. I'm listening. You're on speaker, but
Are you getting your steps in?
yeah, literally. Here, let me see. Can I do this?
No, okay.
I'm hauling
Oh,
things
yeah.
down these stairs.
Oh, jeez.
I've been hauling these big tubs.
Well, it sounds like you need a little rest. So, how about you tell us about your personal experience with adding in 800 grams of fruits and veggies and how it's helped you, or not?
Did it stop?
Did what
Can
stop?
you?
No,
Hello?
we got you.
Oh, okay. I thought maybe I can't. I don't have good service inside here. It certainly made a big difference for me because I was using carbs like cinnamon rolls and bread or scones and not really vegetable. I do a lot of salads, but there's not a lot of carbs count in that.
Mhm.
And so the first go around when I did that 800, I thought I was going to die because I was at 10 o'clock at night trying to eat more cauliflower and stuff, because you can eat a ton of food and still not even reach. And so But now I do a baked potato and I try and do that at breakfast with an egg or 2 eggs. And you get a lot of carbs in and it's good versus the other ways. I also feel like I don't crave sugar as much now that I started doing fruits and vegetables,
Yep.
which is huge.
Yep. Exactly.
But I was one of those people, I did like 600 calories a day trying to keep from getting any heavier. And I went to dinner with Derek and Jen, and they were like, they ordered all this food, like 3 meals, big meals for those two. And I ordered a chicken breast and salad because I had flown in from Korea and I hadn't eaten for 18 hours except for some weird stuff on the plane. And so when I was sitting down with them, that's all I ordered. And I thought I was ordering a lot because I was hungry. And so they're like, they start talking between each other and they didn't say anything. And pretty soon it's like, why aren't you eating? And then they explained to me that you can't lose weight if you don't feed your body. And I went from like 600 calories and I got on their program and started they worked me up to like 2,400 calories a day. And I've lost like 78 pounds. Wow. Otherwise I'd been for, I don't know, 16 years, not losing anything, but continuing to gain more and never eating and never getting to eat things I like. Mm-hmm. I could have been that person who lived on Oreos, but I've tried not to. But it's like,
you are my kind of gal.
You know, it was fun while it lasted, but I'm doing okay without that junk. So, in fact, yesterday I was going, and then it was like, I loved it going in, but I don't know, maybe 30 minutes later, I started thinking, oh, I wish I would have had those berries and I could have just put some cream on it instead. But that's okay, because now I don't need any more for a while.
Yeah.
But
well, and yeah, you're not guilting yourself for having it. You just understand the difference now of like, oh, I could have done something else. And, you know, it's all of this give and take. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Where before it was like, you would not eat anything. And then like, almost like, well, I'm going to sneak these chocolates, but they're really small. So like, it's nothing, it's nothing, it's nothing. But they add up, you know? Mm-hmm. And it's like, yeah, well, that's the difference between understanding what you're putting in your body and allowing yourself to actually eat versus like, oh no, I can't have that. I can't have that. And then I'm going to go and pretend I'm not eating this stuff so like nobody sees me too. Right. And but then you feel guilty about it. You're like shameful eating and you feel shitty about yourself. Where now it's like, oh yeah, well, I'm going to have this fucking scone and I don't give a shit. I know what it's going to, like, I need the calories and I know what it's going to do. And I've hit all my other stuff that's really good today. So that's the balance, you know? Right. Yeah, she's been crushing. Yeah, I like keeping track of the macros. It's hard at first to get used to it, and then some days it's like, oh, this is a pain. But I try and make sure I do it after each meal, or even if I'm pre-planning, and then I can just change the amounts if I know what I'm going to have, and it's so worth it. When I got off the plane that day, when I saw them, it was 3.5 years ago. I had to have a wheelchair in the airports. I used a cane because my knees were killing me and I couldn't walk and stuff.
And look at you lugging those totes up and down those stairs now.
It's huge.
Mom, I'm so proud of you.
Thank you. It's, Derek and Jen have been my heroes because they've helped me through and on days, when I think I can't do it or whatever, I tap on it or whatever I need to do to keep going. But It's like, I had a goal that the next time I saw my grandkids, I wouldn't have to be like, if they wanted me to pick them up and walk, I could do that now, which I couldn't before. And I couldn't walk very far with them. They had to wait for me, and they were like 2 and 5 or 2 and 4.5, and I couldn't keep up. But now I'm going to give them a run for their money.
Yes, you are.
Yeah. Good for you.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
It has paid off well.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not done. doing it and keep going. So
Well, Mom, I think that's also a perfect example of, you know, you were trying all this all in stuff and then falling off, and then you started working with us, and we create a program that works for you. And okay, well, what can we add in? What can we take away? And it's these slowly. I mean, you know, how long have you been? It's been like 2 years, right?
no, it's
3?
like 3.
3. Okay, 3 years.
It was
But that's that's it, guys. Like 80, you know, almost 80 pounds in 3 years. Like that's insane progress. But if you think about it in like, you know, 6 months, maybe it's not there and you get discouraged, you know, or you're so burnt out by then. So that's like, you have to create these little changes. And hey, it goes like this and this, right? Like sometimes you're making huge progress and then you're like, oh, we're in a stalemate or we're stalling, or like I kind of derailed a little bit. I kind of fell off. Okay, great. Like, are you ready to get back on? What can balance out, right? And that's the thing I know, Michelle, that you're dealing with too, is it's like, okay, well, what does this more sustainable look like, you know? And how can I fit this into what I want to do for me forever, you know?
But and this is where the struggle is, because I feel like when I'm all in, I'm good. It's sustainable. But then everybody's like, you got to take a rest. You got to slow down. And then I start to second guess myself. And then I just stop doing
Well,
it.
so also remember that it's your journey, it's no one else's,
Mm.
right? So sometimes we have to tell people to fuck off,
Yeah, well, that doesn't go well when I do
right?
that either.
Yeah, but also, what's that?
I understand
Yeah.
because I had to do it,
It's
not let my
me.
husband know I was paying for it, you know, and it's like it just I decided that I wanted to live, so I don't care what it costs. And now I don't care if he knows or or whatever. But my biggest thing was I didn't know what to do. So even now I maybe could do it on my own, but like I had my call with Jen this morning, and it's like she thinks I was, with all the things I've been doing, I'm not feeding myself enough. So she changes. Those guys control the, what macros, what you have to raise, whether it's the fats or whatever things. Now I have trouble getting enough protein in. I can get the other part, but it's really nice, and I think it's helped me sustain it for such a long period and want to stick with it now, just because I know how much better I feel, and I don't have to think about it. Jen does all that reading. She knows all the seed cycling garbage. I don't have time for that nonsense. I just listen to somebody who has the knowledge.
Yeah.
And I think, I used to go to doctors and let them tell me, oh yeah, you could do this or that or whatever, and try their stuff that didn't work. And so now I figure she's my expert and Derek's the expert on the things I have to do to think positive. And if you can help it, don't give up on yourself. That's all I can say, hon, because
Well, and that kind of is,
it really is.
That's where I'm at this week. Like, I really did a lot of reflecting over the weekend, and I just, you know what? I feel better when I'm tracking my food very rigidly. I feel better when I am in the gym working out. I feel better when I'm doing all of the things.
Yeah.
So either you can do it with me or you don't have to. I'm not asking you to do it with me, but this is what I need to do for me.
Yeah.
I feel better when
Aren't you tired of doing that stuff yet?
No.
You've been doing it for such a time. It's like, no, I've been packing because we're moving and trying to sell a house. And I gave away size 18 through 26 clothes to people. I had closet full and bags. And I thought, it might have taken me 3 years, but it took me 23 or more to get to the point where I was wearing that size and felt horrible and had to have some young kid push me around in an airport. And so, yeah, do it for you. And you can call me, I'll do it with you, even if it's just on the phone.
Well, and I think it's important to recognize, like, Well, if you start to feel burnout, add in more self-care. Dial back a little bit. It doesn't mean you have to stop completely, but maybe dial back a little bit. And sometimes we get injured or we get sick, and that's a good indicator of like your body's telling you to slow the fuck down. Or we get overly stressed or overly like whatever that is, and sometimes we need to take a chill break. But also, like, if you're feeling in the rhythm, great, be in the rhythm. you know we just, especially with this, we want to start to teach you the awareness of, because it's so easy to just continue to push through, and then you're wrecked, and then that's when it's like, well, I don't fucking care anymore, I'm just over it. you know um so figure out, like, everybody's different as individuals, and that's the beauty of it is, well, what is okay for you? Like, Jen's a fucking workhorse, and she just work. I can't work the way she does. I tried to. I started having panic attacks. And I'm like, okay, I can't. Like, this isn't my pace. Like, I work different, and that's okay. You know, and it's about being more intentional with what you do too. It's like, well, let's work smarter and not harder. So that doesn't always mean you have to go 100%, but it's like I know Jen's got a client right now that she's been battling with because the client wants to go in a cut. And so it's like, okay, well, that going in a cut means that you can't exercise as much because you don't have the fuel, right? And you're going to cause more stress, which leads to more weight gain. And people don't want to listen to that sometimes. So it's like, okay, well, like, I'll drop your calories. Like she's telling me this morning, I'll drop your calories, but you can't work out 5 days a week, and you have to only walk on the weekend, And so she was reading all of like her biofeedback and stuff, and like, okay, well, I did 2 hard CrossFit workouts that she wasn't supposed to do, and I walked 6.5 miles, which was actually a hike. It's like, that's not chill, that's too much. And her weight was up, and then she was like, wants to talk to Jen about why her weight's up. It's like, because you didn't listen, you're doing too much. Like, dial back. If you're all in, that means listening to your body, and sometimes that's dialing back, right? Like, okay, great, what else can you focus on? Go have a nice evening out with your kid, go take him to a fun meal, or go just do something fun. Go walk around the zoo or something, right? Like, I know a big thing that's been a huge change in my mom's life and a lot of our clients is just adding in steps. So like, next week, we're just going to be like working on getting enough steps in every day. Like, that's a big thing. And we don't realize how underrated it is, because it's so good for actually de-stressing your body and your mind. And by doing that, you're also just increasing your body's metabolism just naturally, right? We call it NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So you're just moving and burning fuel, but it's a type of movement that is de-stressing your body. It's so underrated. And so many people, just by adding in that, see a lot of decrease in weight just from inflammation and stress.
So question, Derek,
Yeah.
if I just walk a ton, like really walk a lot, and eat mostly okay,
Yeah.
and not weight train, I can still lose weight in a healthy way?
I would say so, yeah. Yeah, but you have to remember, weightlifting is not just good for losing weight. It's also good for building healthier bones. Like, as we age, it's really good for helping osteoporosis and things like that you're not going to get just by walking. And then building muscle, you're going to, you're going to increase your body's metabolism by having more muscle mass. But that doesn't mean you have to just hardcore kill it in the gym, like, so our bones need that stress. So it's like, just like building muscle, it creates little micro like breaks in our bones when we stress it with weightlifting. And that's what builds harder, stronger bones. Right. So for just a weight loss standpoint, yes. But from an overall health, I would say still continue to do some of that, but it doesn't necessarily have to be what you think it is, right? It doesn't have to be like a hardcore hit workout. that could be actually causing you more stress. Maybe you need more, like I like more of a body lifting style where it's like I do one set of really heavy weights and then I rest. And then I do another set of really heavy weights and then I rest. And I'm allowing my body to just rest. I prefer that more. Jen loves like hardcore CrossFit and she just wants to like crush herself. But then she has to eat and refuel a lot differently than I do, And so that's why it's like all of the things that you want to do are capable, but something's got to give somewhere, and that's the balance, right?
Got it.
So I would say for you this week, let's start focusing on higher quality foods. Try and get 800 grams of fruits and vegetables. And 800 grams is not when you track it in MyFitnessPal and it's 800 grams of carbs. That's a shit ton of carbs. But like if you were to weigh it on a scale, the actual weight is 800 grams. So I don't know exactly. Okay. Yeah. I better be clear about that because you will be really overeating and a ton. Yeah. So it's 800 grams of physical weight if you're to weigh it on a scale. And each one of those is going to have a little bit different equation as to how much the weight actually equates into carbohydrates, like grams. So you'll just have to see, but for now, just get those 800 grams of actual weight of fruits and veggies and maybe not even worry about how many carbs that is. If you're already tracking, track it and see the difference, see it like, 100 grams of physical weight of potatoes is going to most likely be a different carbohydrate breakdown than 100 grams of physical weight of blueberries, right? So just see and start to put those in and just create that awareness around that. Does that help, Anna?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Of course. Yeah, of course. I think this week's going to be a good one because I know a lot of people struggle with food and want more info on food and, being able to understand some like the timing and how different foods are actually affecting us is important, and being able to, I think a lot of times our relationship with food is broken. And so that's why I want to build in some of the some of the mindset stuff from last week into this week when it's like moderation with food, understanding and starting to see some of those patterns and behavior of like, well, what foods do I feel guilty with? What foods, and why? Like, okay, well, maybe I can track it back to something specific and then we could tap on it or do something, right? So we want to be able to release that fear around those certain foods because it's not good food or bad food. It's just food that's either going to fuel you better or like stop your progress more, Does that make sense? So starting to view it more, even objectively of like, all right, well, this is fuel. Like food is just fuel. And you can either fuel your body to burn fat and build muscle, or you can fuel it to gain fat and eat muscle, So just take that in and think about it and start to add in some good stuff. And maybe sometimes it's also just take away, like if you like sodas, great. Well, like take away sodas and see, how your body feels. So it's not about having to do everything all at once and having this perfect macro and eating everything great, right? Sometimes it's just like, well, what can you take away that's hindering your progress? Maybe it's, progress physically, mentally, emotionally, right? Foods we emotionally eat too. So start to think about, all right, well, when I eat these sort of things, it actually is not healthy for me. So let's cut that out, right? Or let's add in more fruits and veggies and see how I feel. Or let's add in protein if I have a hard time getting a lot of protein. Okay. Do you guys have any questions? You guys are awesome, crushing it. Anything from last week that you have
good.
questions on? You guys feeling good? We have to do the drawing. So all of your points for week 1. I gotta tell you, Michelle is a little ahead, so she's got an advantage, and Tammy's close behind. But you guys are all picking up. All right, you ready? Who is it?
And what's it for?
So this is going to be for a gift card for coffee, for Mindset. Cool. Coffee. Okay, Michelle, you win.
Yay!
I did some practice ones earlier just to make sure that I didn't pull your name every single time. So I had it mixed up enough. So starting today, the next week will be new stuff, but all the stuff from last week will all go into the overall prize. Okay. So remember, like, keep
Yeah, okay.
posting. What's that?
Congrats, Michelle. You can
Yeah,
buy
good
me
job,
coffee.
Michelle. So keep posting about stuff, even post stuff from last week. Still maintain your morning, routines, evening routines, tapping routines. So all of those things, show yourself doing those things, gratitude walks, all of that stuff still adds into points, because we want to think about still creating that sustainability, and having all those things be part of your day moving forward as well. And again, it's like nothing has to be final. Start playing around and see what things are really resonating with you, that you're having a tendency like, oh, you know what, I'm really enjoying this journaling, or I tried journaling and I don't really love it. Let me try something else, or and see what that looks like, right? So play around with things. That's part of the process. And what you're loving today might change next week, and that's okay too. And maybe you'll end up coming back to it, right? So just start to think about, all right, what are these good habits that I'm really building that are setting me up for my future success and that I'm enjoying right now too. Okay. Makes sense, guys?
Yep.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Awesome. You're welcome. Michelle, I will give you a gift card sent over.
Perfect.
All right. Congrats. Nice work.
Thank you.
You're welcome, guys. Keep crushing it. As always, reach out if you have any questions. And I look forward to just talking with you guys some more. All right.
Good night.
Bye. Good night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye, guys.